Welcome back to the Constitutional Clarion. The death of Steele Hall, which was announced the day I'm recording this, the 10th of June 2024, reminded me of two quite interesting constitutional issues which he encountered concerning the Governor of South Australia. Steele Hall was initially a state politician in South Australia who belonged to the Liberal and Country League. He became the leader of the Liberal and Country League from 1966, following a more traditional leader, Thomas Playford. Now, Playford had managed to serve as Premier of the state of South Australia for over 26 years, which is an extraordinary period of time, but partly due to the fact that he had established a form of electoral malapportionment in South Australia, which favoured country electorates which had very low populations. Now, this made it extremely difficult for the Labor Party to win an election. Labor finally managed to win an election in 1965, despite this disadvantage. Playford relinquished his leadership of the Liberal and Country League about a year and a half later and was replaced by the younger and good-looking Steele Hall. On the Labor side, the new Premier, Frank Walsh, who had been described in the media as a Neanderthal figure in the television age, was then replaced by the younger and much more charismatic Dunstan. In February 1968, as the next state election was looming, the Premier, Dunstan, did something quite unusual. He sent a recommendation to the British government for the replacement of the existing governor, Sir Edric Bastyan, who was a retired British Army officer, with the renowned Australian scientist Sir Mark Oliphant. At the time, the Queen was still formally advised by British ministers in relation to the appointment of state governors, although state premiers could indicate their wishes to the British government, and the British government would normally comply with them. What was particularly unusual about this request was that it was made on the 26th of February, just days before the polling day, which was on the 2nd of March. It was therefore in what we would now describe as the caretaker period, and hence an inappropriate request, as it would bind and affect an incoming government. The British government, with the support of the Queen's private secretary, Sir Michael Ledeen, and through him, indeed, the Queen, declined to recommend to the Queen that Oliphant be appointed and delayed any appointment until after the election. The election resulted in a hung parliament, but eventually it was Steele Hall who became Premier. He requested the appointment of a different Australian to be the next governor, Sir James Harrison. Harrison's appointment was made consistent with Hall's request as Premier. Oliphant later did become Governor of South Australia in 1971 after Dunstan had been returned to office as Premier. But at the time of the election, Sir Edric Bastyan remained the state governor. At the election, the incumbent Labor government, led by Dunstan, had won 53.2% of the two-party preferred vote, and the Liberal Country League, led by Steele Hall, had won 46.8% of the vote. On its face, it would seem that Labor had won and the Liberals had lost. But because of the malapportionment of the electoral system, both sides won exactly the same number of seats, with an independent, Tom Stott, holding the balance of power. Stott decided to support the Liberals. Dunstan, as the incumbent Premier, exercised his right to remain as Premier and face the Parliament to see where confidence lay on the floor of the lower house. He did so, and he was defeated on a confidence motion, and then, appropriately, he resigned. Now, this is where things get quite interesting. I'm only relying here on one source, as I've never found any of the original documents about this, so if anyone does, please let me know where they are. All I have is a description of what occurred from a chapter in a book by Peter Howell, and the book's called The Politics of Democracy in South Australia, published by the State Electoral Office and the History Trust of South Australia in 2007. But this is what it says. Sir Edric sent for Hall, led him to the study in Government House, invited him to sit in an armchair, and standing before him, said that he would commission him as Premier if he would give an undertaking not to rest until he had secured the support of enough of his parliamentary colleagues to legislate to remedy the electoral malapportionment, so long a striking feature of the South Australian political landscape. Hall accepted office on those terms and proceeded to carry out his pledge, knowing that such an action would split his party as well as costing him the next election, as it did." Unquote. Such a condition, while supportive of the constitutional principle of representative government, would appear to go well beyond the type of conditions that a governor could legitimately impose. It also raises the question of what the governor would have done if Hall had refused to accept such a condition. It would not have been viable to reappoint Dunstan as Premier in such circumstances, as he had lost a vote of confidence in the lower house. Perhaps Bastyan saw this as the necessary nudge to cause change. Hall could have justified his actions to his colleagues by saying that it was a condition upon which he accepted government and that he therefore had to honour it. Perhaps, in its way, it was a form of political cover for Hall, who was apparently quite embarrassed about taking office despite having lost the overall vote, and was therefore supportive of correcting the electoral system. The electoral system was indeed reformed, and as a consequence, Hall lost office at the next election, as he knew he would. He's one of the very few politicians who have lost office for committing a noble act, an act of restoring fairness to the electoral system. For this, he will be remembered with respect. Thank you for watching the Constitutional Clarion, and as always, I look forward to seeing you again next time. Goodbye.